fabulous individual whose history and the way he lived his life is something that is to be admired and to be followed, I think. And so I'm going to talk to you about Mr. Wilson, the man, the educator, who someone described earlier as being kind of scary. He was. He was not a big man, but he had a way of looking at you that made him big. And of course, I came to know him as I came to Andalusia Junior High School at that time. We were called junior worms, for those of y'all who remember coming to the 7th grade. We were the lowest life form on earth. And Mr. Wilson kind of enjoyed that himself. But I want to go through some things here about Mr. Wilson. Serious things about it, and I'm going to have a question for you when I get finished. It's not going to be a test, it's just a question or something to think about later on. So I've got some information here I'm going to go over with you, and then we'll talk about something humorous that happened when I was in high school. As of today, we have presented outstanding graduate awards to 62 people who graduated from Andalusia High School, Woodson High School, Ralph Bunch High School. By my count, all but 6 directly benefited from the leadership and educational standards set by today's final inductee and the first inductee inducted after his death, and that's James Arthur Wilson. It was a long journey from the farmer school on the Brooklyn Road where Mr. Wilson began his education and where school terms were only 3 months, to him of the Andalusia High School. He moved from the farmer school to a 9-month school in Andalusia in 1912. After completing the 5th grade there in 1915, Mr. Wilson, the man who would come to be known as a paragon of education, dropped out of school. He had an older sister, and the family could not afford tuition for both. This is one of the points that I'm getting to, so keep that in mind. So he dropped out. He was taught at home by his mother until the 1918-1919 school year, when he entered Andalusia City School system, which included all 12 grades. And guess where that building is? You're sitting in it. The building was built in 1914, but there was a building here that was moved, and this building built. He had, as we said, an older sister, and he couldn't afford tuition for both. He was taught at home by his mother to the 1918-19 school year when he entered Andalusia City School. I've already said that, I think. And included all 12 grades. It was located in this building. He completed through 7th grade before again becoming a dropout. Times were hard in the rural South, and he went to work in the meat packing company located where the Altex later stood. A lot of people don't know that. That big building that was out there at the Alatex site, which later became the Alatex textile. That building started out being a meat processing plant. And so he went to work there after he drop out of school because he didn't have money to go to school with. He completed through the 7th grade before again becoming a dropout. Times apart, I just said that. In the summer of 1919, having saved enough money for his situation, he came back to Andalusia State School, taking the job as a janitor in the elementary school building. The elementary school building, this building. In fact, it was all the school buildings, but the elementary part of it was back here in the back somewhere. In 1920, get this, in 1920, he was a member of the first Andalusia high school football team. Like other members of the team, he had a shoe man nail cleats to the bottom of his broken shoes. That was his football shoes. Mr. Wilson's main football role that year was a bench warmer. But his junior year, he was a starting linebacker. As I said before, y'all remember he was not a big man, but he was tough, strong. James Arthur Wilson was the valedictorian of the Andalusia High School class of 1923. For graduation, his father gave him a claw hammer, which he used that summer, working as a carpenter on the Gant Dam and the hydro plant construction project. That was his graduation present. A hammer. Times were tough. He enrolled in Marion Military Institute on a football scholarship. I didn't know that until somebody looked this up on me. He enrolled in Marion Military Institute on a football scholarship and earned an associate's degree in science, pre-med, 2 years later. James Arthur Wilson intended to become a doctor. He wanted to be a doctor so bad. That was his main goal in life, was to be a doctor. But he was unable to secure a loan for medical school. Instead, he accepted a position teaching and as principal in the Covington County school system. During his 3-year tenure, he earned $60 a month. My grandson spends more than that on the weekend. After 3 years, he had saved enough money to enroll in Howard College, which of course is now Samford University. He completed his degree and was once again in debt. He accepted a job teaching science at Andalusia High School, expecting to teach for a year, pay his debts, and then enter medical school. But the death of his father during the Christmas holidays in 1929 sealed his future as an educator. He could no longer had assets, or any way to earn assets to go to medical school, so he got into education. He said he couldn't leave his mother without support. So he taught the next 11 years and helped his brother. Remember what I told you before? Helped his brother through college. In 1940, he turned down a job at Marion Military Institute and instead took a job as executive secretary of the Alabama Education Association. It was in Montgomery. That meant, and while he started that job, he met and married Lucille Pullen. Shortly after their 1941 wedding, James Arthur Wilson was drafted into the Army Signal Corps. So his plans to be an educator now are being interrupted by war. After being discharged, he worked at a Mobile shipyard, then taught physics at Murphy High School for 3 years before being offered the job of principal at Andalusia High School in 1946. I was born the next year. He already lived a lifetime. And while most of us remember Mr. Wilson for his academic standards, one of the first things he did as principal, listen to this, fantastic. One of the first things he did as principal was reestablish the football team that had been discontinued during the war. The 1947 team, that's the year I was born, was undefeated. I had nothing to do with football team. But it's kind of cool. During his tenure, Andalusia High School came to be known as an institution of high quality teaching and instruction that produced students well prepared for post-secondary education. Mr. Wilson resigned as principal in 1964 and became head of the science department for the next 7 years. He retired from Andalusia High School in 1971. Now let's go through that again. He retired as principal in 1964 and then taught science for 7 years. Throughout his life, Mr. Wilson made sacrifices to help others, including setting aside a dream of becoming a physician so that he could help his mother after his father's death. It should be noted here that Mr. Wilson's son, James Arthur Wilson Jr., did become a well-known physician in Florida and died several years ago. So that Mr. Wilson talked about that all the time. His son James becoming a physician. That became really the object of the latter years of his life. We were very pleased that Mr. Wilson's grandson, James Arthur, his third, or Jay, is here today to accept the award. Jay, are you here?
Yep.
I've got one more thing to tell.
Okay.
Before you say something. Put that on your arm, actually. It's correct. The correct way to present it. I'm gonna ask James to sit here, or Trey, sit here while I tell this story. As I said, Mr. Wilson was principal at Andalusia High School up until the end of my junior year. And there's some of my classmates, Mickey's here, Ward's here, Robert's here, Nancy's here. We were all members of that class. And so at the end of our junior year, we finished with Mr. Wilson. Even though we loved him, he was tough. So we went and had our summer doings, whatever we did. And we came back in the fall to register for chemistry. Chemistry. And there sat Mr. Wilson in the lab before we walked in. Had a little smile on his face. Looked bitter. Of course, he was a great teacher and a real character. But I've got to tell you about one event. Mr. Wilson would always have an answer for you. If there was a question, if there was an issue, he had an answer for you. He had a voice very deep like this, and you could hear him all over the building, especially if he was trying to get someone down to his office. He didn't need a megaphone. He just walked out the whole hallway and called whoever was wanted. So he began teaching us chemistry, and of course had that famous voice. And y'all remember a chemistry lab table is about maybe 12 feet long or something like that. And on one end it's got a sink and a gas outlet. And on the other end it's got an electrical plug and bill, and you can do experiments on that desk. And it's about maybe 10 or 12 feet long. And behind it was a big, huge blackboard. And so as he would do his his experiments on on the chemistry table, on the table between us and students would be looking at him behind the table. And he would turn around and explain what was going on with his blackboard. Well, we walked in that day, the class, and he had 5 beakers of liquid lined up this way on top of the table. And they were all the same color. I mean, they looked like water. They were 5 different things. He had taken a lamp, like a lamp in your bedroom. You can take everything off of it, and you just got a little gizmo there that you plug, that you screw the lamp into, and there's a cord coming out of there, and you can plug that cord in, and that light will come up. I mean, it's a cord sticking in an electric light, outlet, right? And then he would unplug it. Well, what he was doing, he took the plug off, and he stripped the stuff on the cord with two pieces of metal coming out of that, 2 pieces out of the cord sticking out like this. And that was that's where the plug would be, but he had taken all that off, and he had those 2 things, and he had a cord and a light down here. And what he would do is he would go down to the very first beaker of material, very carefully plug that light in, and then very carefully dip those 2 pieces of metal down in that material. And sometimes they'd light up, sometimes they wouldn't. And what he would do, if it didn't light up, he very carefully, and I was watching because I was sitting in the very front row, and Ward was right behind me, Robert was right behind him, and he would very carefully unplug it so that you could reach and grab it with your hand, then it would bother you. And then he would turn around the blackboard and he would say, all right, what is in this beaker that I just did? He would have to tell you what that was and why it did not conduct electricity. That was the point of what he was doing. All right, then he went to the second one very carefully, got that thing in hand, and then plugged it in and dropped those 2 cords down in, and it would light up. And then he very carefully, take it out and unplug it, lay it down, and then he would tell you, and the whole time I'm saying, this ain't gonna end well. This ain't gonna be good. And sure enough, we got to I think the fourth beaker. It was the fourth beaker, and then the fifth beaker, the science test would be over. And he did the fourth one right, but when he laid it down, he didn't unplug it. He just laid it down and started talking on the putting stuff on the blackboard and everything. And I knew darn well what was fixing to happen, but I'm not going to tell Mr. Wilson, watch out. He reaches down and grabs that thing with his hand. He knocks everything on that table off, all that material, like glass. Bill Palmer was sitting down here where the thing was plugged in. Thank goodness, but Bill was the fastest guy on our team. Richard, you remember? He got over there and snatched that thing out. But Mr. Wilson's stuff was all over the floor. Broken glass, whatever material was in that stuff was all over people's clothes and books. And he never showed any emotion. He turned around and said, "That shows that the human body conducts electricity." Or didn't that what he said? And I said, we could have killed about 3 or 4 people that day. But he always had that little bit of humor that he would throw out there and fix whatever problem we had. So now,
Hey, good morning. Hey, my name is Jay Wilson. Thanks for having me, Mayor. Thanks to all the folks that put this together. It's a very big honor for me to be here. I'm not really worthy of it, but I really love my grandfather. My dad really respected and honored my grandfather. He was James Arthur Wilson Jr. I'm James Arthur Wilson III, and I really respected both of them. My son is James Arthur Wilson IV. I have a lot of fond memories of coming back here to Andalusia. At least 2 or 3 times a year we would come to visit, even after my grandfather was gone, after I was about 10 years old. I'd still come to visit my grandmother and heard a lot of these great stories and a lot of the history. I know from studying myself, I ended up with the boxes and files. My dad was a busy guy, but he kept all the artifacts. My grandfather was very interested in genealogy. His handwriting is scrawled all over papers, describing all manner of events and related peoples and families all across South Alabama. I know quite a bit about my history. Amos Wilson came down from the Carolinas, and his son Anderson Purdue, and his son Hugh Benjamin, and who was my great grandfather. And I've got a lot of that history, and it's all because of my grandfather. He was a very humorous guy. I only knew him as a kid. He was very friendly to me, so it was always very interesting hearing the stories about how he was so scary. By the time I knew him, he was a gentle old guy, right? But I heard all the stories from aunts and uncles and friends around the house, and well, I need to go back and say just thank you again for my wife coming with me to this, and also we were on our way visiting. We're going to visit our daughter who's at Auburn, and we'll be back there tomorrow. But I wanted to make sure I went back and said thank you for those bits. But this is a really big honor. I know a lot about the history. I heard more of today, and it was fantastic. And I know I'm doing something wrong. This is not something I practiced or prepared for or knew about. So I really appreciate this honor in his honor, and I really will be back to visit as well. And thank you for your time. Thank you.